Hello and welcome to The Drum. I'm Steve Cannane. Coming up, the floor is back. A wild ride in federal parliament as votes go every which way. The banks strike back at Joe Hockey. And should juvenile detention centres be scrapped? Our panel tonight, ABC Online's chief political writer, Annabel Crabb, author and academic, Waleed Ali, and New South Wales Liberal MP, Prue Goward. First up today, today was the first day that private members' business was voted on in the new parliament, and there were some pretty interesting results. The government was defeated on a youth allowance bill, but then gave in to releasing information on the Henry tax review. While the opposition's bill for a judicial inquiry into the Building Education Revolution program didn't make it to a formal division, when it became clear the opposition didn't have the numbers. Independent Rob Oakeshott says it was a good day for parliamentary democracy.
Today's a significant day. I know plenty of people here heard me bang on there for a while about how the local member is back, how the floor of the parliament is back, and how members of parliament who value their vote on the floor of the parliament is back. Today we saw a tangible example of that, where for the first time in a long time we saw two private members' bills voted on, well, to be voted on, one wasn't, and three motions also voted on. All sorts of strategy happened around each of them, all sorts of politics around each of them. Even amongst ourselves, I think we voted in different ways. But this is an opportunity and a demonstration to everyone that the floor of the parliament is back and the floor of the parliament matters.
And even though Joe Hockey's motion to have the modelling for the Henry tax review released failed, Greens MP Adam Bandt helped force the government's hand.
The Treasurer called me this morning to advise that they would be releasing all of the documents that fell within the purview of the Coalition's motion. And on that basis, I didn't see the need to support the motion anymore, but that would not have happened if we did not have the composition of the parliament that we've currently got.
Annabel, Julia Gillard promised she was going to let the sunshine in, but it seems like her government was forced to let the sunshine in on this one.
There's possibly a third screwdriver on the window of democracy there, forcing it open. Look, I think that this is the way that things are going to work from here on in. And it is proving to be a really interesting system. And I think that the fact that each member of the House is now responsible for their own vote, and that issues aren't just assumed to be decided one way or the other on the basis of the numbers. I mean, it's turning out to be a very demanding House, but also kind of a productive one, in the sense that governments are forced to justify decisions that they make because they have to convince people. And this back and forth with Adam Bandt on the question of the releasing of the Henry Review documents is a case in point. You know, Wayne Swan had to pick up the phone and explain to Adam Bandt, you know, what they were planning to do, make a compromise, and release these documents, which will, be ferreted through and generally declared to be useful or useless. Well, time will tell.
Waleed, do you think we're going to see a more transparent parliament this time around?
Up until the next election, yes.
And then it'll go back to normal?
Yeah, I think anybody who thinks that we're witnessing some kind of sea change, a change in Australian politics...
It's an artificial sea change.
Yeah, exactly. I can't see this being something that lasts. Evidence of that is the fact that you don't have the Labor Party, for instance, providing more information and talking with any greater gusto to the coalition than they were. They're talking to the independents and the people on the crossbenches because they know that they have to in order to get the support that they're interested in. I know Christopher Pyne has been speaking to the independents, Julia Gillard, Wayne Swan, they've been speaking to the independents. They're not interested in talking to each other, though, the major parties. So you're not seeing a kinder, gentler polity. You're not seeing greater cooperation between the major parties in the national interest. What you're seeing is the game of politics played out as it always is, but in this case with very different players in the arena, and so that means that the way that you go about conducting yourself has to be slightly different.
I think essentially what you say is true, but I think that you're actually seeing politicians forced to use argument, forced to be persuasive, which happens, I think, less and less in modern politics, that a politician, a minister or a leader is forced to actually make an argument. And at the moment, that's to minority I was going to say senators, minority MPs. But, I mean, the fact that they're having to make it at all, I think, is a good thing. And, I agree with you that this is a circumstance that's brought on by necessity, but it'd be nice if they got into the habit of it.
And Annabel, interesting too that the coalition is portraying the Greens as radicals and as being in coalition with Labor, yet the Greens have helped get some documents out that the coalition wanted out.
Yep, and I think that there will be circumstances on many occasions where the crossbenchers vote with the coalition, and I think that all of the crossbenchers, except for Adam Band, voted for the youth allowance legislation. But if you look at all those crossbenchers in the different votes that were staged this morning, they behave differently every time, and that. I think that will be true of the Greens on occasion too. Well,
even though the government did release some information from the Henry tax review, the government is still defying a Senate order to explain how it came up with the multi-billion-dollar figure it claims the new mining tax will bring. Shadow Assistant Treasurer Matthias Cormann says Labor is failing to live up to its promise of transparency.
The Gillard government has turned out to be the most secretive government ever. They're more secretive than the Rudd government was, which would comply with these sorts of orders on a regular basis. As far as, for example, the Senate has asked for information about commodity price, production volume and exchange rate assumptions. Those assumptions are very important because they have had a significant impact on how much revenue the government thinks they're going to raise from this mining tax.
Annabel, why isn't the government releasing this information that Matthias Cormann wants out when they're happy to release the Henry tax review information?
Well, I think at this stage they're not convinced that they're going to be compelled to release it. I mean, the Senate has demanded that the government release it, as the Senate has demanded the government do things in past governments. I mean, the Senate is very famous for demanding governments do things, particularly because the Senate is generally, throughout Australia's history, controlled by a coalition of other parties than the government. This government is ignoring this particular demand because it says that to release the information about the mining tax would be to expose commercial in confidence information, and it's not prepared to do that. Look, it's not the first time a government has refused to release information. I'm not particularly surprised that it's refused to do it in this case, not saying that I think that's a great thing.
Well, the coalition did have a big win today with the motion for the youth allowance forcing the government to make changes to the eligibility criteria for regional students. It was passed by 74 votes to 70. When the crossbench deserted Labor, only the Greens stuck with the government.
The Prime Minister should hang her head in shame for making this decision today not to support these regional students. Now, we know it's so much more difficult for regional students to get an education and to have a situation in place where this government is making it harder for regional students to get to tertiary education, not easier, is simply wrong.
But it wasn't such a good outcome for the coalition when it came to Christopher Pyne's bill to force a commission of inquiry into the government's school stimulus program. It was declared lost on the voices, and the opposition didn't call for a division, prompting claims of a stuff-up. Leader of the House, Anthony Albanese, says Christopher Pyne's BER campaign is just a stunt.
Now, we've heard a lot of squawking from Christopher Pyne, but when it came to the substance, Christopher Pyne couldn't drag himself into the chamber to actually call for a vote on this legislation. This shows that their BER campaign has no substance, it's all about stunts. The fact that with a lot of notice, a lot of build-up, they simply couldn't have two people to even bother to call for a division on this bill is quite extraordinary.
Waleed, did we need an inquiry into the BER?
I don't know if we need an inquiry into the BER. I think the pink bat situations is a different thing. The BER is different to that, and it's a point I think Malcolm Fraser made, was that you're talking about a failure in about 2% of cases, something like that. That's a success rate in the 90s, and that was the point that Malcolm Fraser was making, saying that, yeah, there are problems that you can look into, but a judicial inquiry is a separate sort of thing. I do think, though, that Christopher Pyne's not attending to vote and not pushing for a division and just accepting that it was lost on the voices. I don't think there's anything that we can read into that, and I think what Anthony Albanese is asking us to do there is very partisan politics.
Prue, I want to come to you on this because both Rob Oakeshott and Andrew Wilkie made the point today that the BER was good for schools in regional areas. Now, you represent a regional area in New South Wales, the seat of Goulburn. Was it good for your area?
I mean, obviously it was better than nothing. The question is how much better could it have been if the money was effectively managed. But, I mean, that's why the independents didn't call for an inquiry, because as far as they were concerned, it was good for their seats and they don't care if a bit was wasted. I agree that... and I've seen it on the floor of the chamber, whips, everybody gets mixed up. You can well understand that Christopher Pyne might not have thought that he should be calling for a division. It happens quite a lot. It's just that it's very rarely noticed in parliaments where the government is a dominant number and you don't notice that things slip through. So that's a mistake. Careless, but it is a mistake.
He explained why, though.
He missed the original vote, didn't he? But didn't call for it to be recommitted. I mean,
well, but I think I think tactically they should be going for divisions all the time, so they are tracking where those four people in the middle.
I've got to say, I was quite persuaded by Christopher Pyne's explanation on this. He basically said it came to his attention that it wasn't going to get through. The crossbenchers were not going to go with him. Therefore, rather than bring it to a vote in the House of Reps and make them take a position which then they would have to retract in order for it ever to pass, he'll put it through the Senate.
Well, he did respond to Anthony Albanese, Christopher Pyne. Let's hear what he did have to say.
Just before 9 o'clock this morning, having heard from all the independents, finally, I resolved that it would be better to keep the judicial inquiry alive by moving it through the Senate and then having the opportunity to vote on it in the new year. And I think it's a sensible political position to adopt, not to force the independents into a pointless vote.
So, Annabel, he's going to take it to the Senate, but what's the point of that? I mean, it's going to end up coming back to the House and it's not going to get past there.
Well, depends. He might feel like he might get a different result there after a bit of time. I mean, I doubt it, really, if they are prepared to support it now. It's not as though it hasn't been pretty well ventilated. Look, I think that the underlying phenomenon here is that parties don't like to lose votes, particularly, I mean, this is a pretty fractious little situation you've got in the House of Reps. There's an enormous amount of kind of blustering going on. There's nothing a manager of business on either side hates more than theatrically losing a vote. They'll